Episode 39, A Brand New Horizon. Fireworks boomed above Toad Town, dyeing the sky with multicolored sparkles. The wrecks of destroyed Koopa tanks still littered the mushroom plains, and many Toad houses bore the scars of the recent attack, but that was something to worry about tomorrow. This was a night for celebration. The great table in Princess Peach's dining hall was packed, its chandeliers ablaze. Outside of the windows, Luigi could see still more townspeople celebrating outside of the castle. This victory was almost as great as the one which had forced out the Koopa troop for the first time, because it had proved that the people of the Mushroom Kingdom could keep what they took back. They weren't just a minor inconvenient bug to squash for the forces of the Koopa Empire. Peach's castle hadn't seen a feast this great since Mario and the Princess' wedding banquet, which seemed like an eternity ago. The table was filled with golden dishes on which were packed with cakes and pies, grilled cheep, the non-talking variety, of course, and roast beef drenched in gravy. Of course, in honor of Luigi, there was enough pasta to feed a town, with pasta dripping down the pile of noodles like lava pouring from a volcano. That wasn't even half of the courses that covered the table, and in the glass by Luigi's side, there was sparkling red Chuck Cola, not the weak, knock-off cola he had gotten at the bar when he had been depressed, but the Chuck Cola from Mushroom Kingdom, taken straight from Governor Flame's secret stash. It was only fitting that they'd drink it on the day that Flame himself had been defeated. Luigi sat at the high seat, which was strange for him. He had never been to a feast where Princess Peach hadn't sat at the head of the table.
"I'll find you, Princess,"
Luigi thought to himself as he took a bite of the spaghetti. It was as good as he had ever had it, cooked by the exceptional Tasty, and the army of eager assistants who had lent their help to the ancient Toad so she wouldn't be stuck preparing for the feast all on her own.
"One day, you're going to be back in your kingdom."
On Luigi's right hand sat Cobal, laughing and telling the stories of his adventures to the Toad Brigade, a glass of Chuck Cola in his hand.
"When the Black Kremling summoned another sword, I totally thought we were finished."
Cobal laughed.
"But no. Who should come blasting in but old K. Rool?" "What, really?"
Billy exclaimed, nearly dropping his fork.
"The old croc?" "Yeah, that's the one,"
Cobal said, smirking.
"He came in guns blazing, blowing out the entire front window of the enemy's bridge. Now that gave Mr. Silverstar something to worry about." "Hey, who would have thought you would do something heroic in the end, huh?"
Donkey Kong chuckled, clapping King K. Rool on the back. The Kremling King was eating a tantalizing banana split with surprisingly dainty manners.
"Oh, shut up,"
K. Rool hissed, taking another bite of bananas.
"That's our boss."
General Clump laughed warmly, biting off a huge chunk of meat from a leg of lamb.
"He might act tough, but he's a real softie. Why do ya think he prefers bananas over meat?" "If you don't stop talking right now, I'm going to turn you into meat,"
K. Rool growled, giving Clump a gaze that would make even the most hardened soldier weep.
"Hey, guys, let's give a cheer for Amy, Wario."
Wario laughed, sending up some of his garlic-tainted breath and making the toads near him grimace.
"If it hadn't have been for the old boy and his airships, y'all still would have been toast." "Hooray for Wario!"
Toadette shouted happily. This was the first time she had said anything other than talking to Captain Toad all throughout the feast. Luigi had even witnessed the two toads kiss 1 or 2 times. It warmed his heart that his actions had led to the two long-lost lovers being reunited once again.
Yeah, Wario time!"
Wario shouted, beginning to shovel large amounts of food into his mouth in an extremely messy fashion.
"Slow down, bro, slow down,"
Waluigi said as he fastidiously took a bite of his caviar. Luigi smiled and leaned back on his chair, looking back at the people feasting. There were Mario's old partners, including Cobal's father, ex-Glitz Pit champion Great Gonzalez Jr., the Kongs, even old Toadsworth, who looked in high spirits as he conversed with a red-capped toad who Luigi knew had been a former mushroom retainer of the princess. The whole gang looked back together. Save for Mario, Yoshi, Daisy, and Princess Peach, of course. Well, no one-up mushroom could bring Mario back, Luigi knew, but Yoshi was still out there, and while nobody knew if Peach was alive, nobody knew if she was dead, either. And as for Daisy, Luigi hadn't heard anything of his former love, even though he heard that Sarasaland hadn't suffered much under the Koopa regime thanks to the easygoing nature of its ruler, Morton Koopa Jr. Perhaps she was still safe. One could always hope. With a sip of sparkling Chuck Cola, Luigi washed away his fears for a day and began to enjoy the celebration of victory. He had earned it. Bowser Jr. stood on ramparts of Bowser's castle, his hair flapping in the wind. Before him stood the surprisingly elegant Flame City, with its canals of lava and red-roofed manors with walled gardens. And above the city hovered the largest armada assembled since the conquest of the Metro Kingdom. There were over 1,000 battleships, neatly arranged in formation, with his own fleet making up the center and Lemmy's and Iggy's on either side. The sun broke through the thick dark cloud cover, glinting off the polished cannons.
"This is it,"
Bowser Jr. announced, raising his arms and speaking to his siblings beside him.
"With this fleet, I'm gonna smash the Neo Empire." "Heh, it's about time,"
Iggy chuckled, cracking his knuckles.
"Those upstarts deserve an explosive rainfall." "It does seem sad, though,"
Lemmy remarked, glancing at Bowser Jr. with concerned eyes. Bowser Jr. looked at his brother, ready to listen to what he had to say. While the smallest of the Koopalings no longer acted like a child, he was still sweet and kind compared to his siblings.
"I mean,"
he continued,
"Ludwig, Roy, Larry, and Wendy were always irritating, but we had some good times, too."
He looked up at the fleet, which seemed to stretch to the horizon, an invincible display of the Koopa Empire's might.
"I remember my 8th birthday. Ludwig cooked up this special ball in my lab that was twice as bouncy as my previous ones. Yeah, and Larry and I used to prank Kamek and Cammy all the time."
Iggy reminisced nostalgically, adjusting his glasses.
"He was a great guy, even though he wouldn't hesitate to sell us out." "I know,"
said Bowser Jr., lowering his head and closing his eyes. Memories flashed through his head. Ludwig showing off the new clown car upgrades he had built, Roy teaching him how to throw a punch, stealing pancakes from the castle kitchen with Larry, shopping for the brand new remote control airship at the Neo Bowser City Mega Mall with Wendy. Even though they had conspired against him and his dad, Bowser Jr. still loved all of them. He didn't get any pleasure from this, and yet it had to be done. He had to do this for his father, and for the Empire. Bowser Jr. opened his eyes.
"Let's get going,"
he said.
"It's time to put an end to this."